Hi everyone, welcome back to One Tip Cricket. We're here for episode 3. We're going to switch things up a little bit and stop talking about and obsessing over Pakistan. So, as again in like the last news from the world of Test cricket was that the rankings have changed a little bit. India were touring New Zealand and they had a pretty dismal showing across 2 tests, which has cost them their spot at number 1. They're no longer number 1. Australia have jumped up to that position. So we have this like trio of teams there that are really competitive. It's super tight. And then there's England sitting in fourth. Your new rankings are now Australia at a rating of 116, New Zealand at a rating of 115, and India at a rating of 114. So what we thought we're going to do today is basically discuss that, like, since the rankings are so close, which of these teams is actually the best team, the best test team right now, or is there another team altogether that one of us thinks is the best test team right now? By and large, test cricket standards right now are nowhere close to what they used to be in the early 2000s when you had an Australian team that was going all over the place and winning everywhere. And then you had that South African team that, I believe, if I'm not wrong, didn't lose a test away, a series away for about 6 years overall. And then, you have this little patch of from the English team in the middle where they won the Ashes away against Australia. And they had a good showing in India as well. And they had a competitive series against Pakistan. So today we're gonna, go over basically like which team all of us think is the best one right now, and we're gonna switch up the order a little bit and start with Khurram.
Okay, so my pick right now is India. And primarily it's because when I look at Test cricket at this moment, everyone is winning at home. That's the general, consensus. India, Australia, New Zealand, you can't beat them at home. But if I look at their overall, how they play abroad, um, they are more competitive than, let's say, Australia or New Zealand in subcontinent conditions. That's still considered away. That's not a guarantee for most of the other subcontinent teams. They're still sorry.
India is from the subcontinent.
I know, but other subcontinent teams aren't winning in away games in the subcontinent either. So Pakistan isn't doing that. Um, Sri Lanka isn't doing that necessarily. Bangladesh
India
is not.
scared. India seems scared of inviting Pakistan to play.
Anyway, we'll get into that in a second. But what I'm trying to say is that they have a dominance at their home that no other team right now has. Not even Australia, not even England, not even South Africa, and they are fairly competitive away from home as well. They picked up a test match in South Africa. They picked up a test match in England.
They won their last series in Australia.
They won their last series in Australia, though we can say that it was a weak team, whatever we want to call that, but it's still yeah, it's still winning in Australia. They had a really, really poor outing in New Zealand. Neither of the test matches lasted more than 3 days. But the fact is that when we talk about who is undefeatable at home at this point, I think currently you cannot beat India in India, and that's why I pick India.
Was there?
You want me to share my pick or?
Yeah.
Great. Yeah. So, I mean, I agree that India is undefeatable at home, and they put out a really strong side. And actually, like I was looking at the stats over the last 2 seasons, they played 13 matches, won 9, lost 3. But really, for me, the real test of a team is when they're away from home, particularly in this era where almost every large team is dominant at home, barring that Australian loss, which was a weak team. So when I look at that and compare teams' away record, England for me came out on top, and they played 12 matches away from home. They won 7, lost 4. And so for me, even though England are number 4 in the ICC rankings, clearly because of the draw at the Ashes, which one can also say they won the World Cup. So there's a bit of fatigue, mental and physical, after that as well. But the fact that they've won away from home and have been dominant and have had really big wins makes, for me at least, they're the best team out there right now.
So out of those 7 wins, I think 4 were against Sri Lanka.
No, Sri Lanka at home is not easy to beat. I mean, come on.
Yeah, I know,
Sri Lanka have had a fortress at home for several years now, and playing them, particularly an England team which is always found wanting for spin, to win so comprehensively against the Sri Lanka side is, I think, a really good achievement.
So Sri Lanka in that short patch that you're talking about when England won, lost to India at home as well, and lost to I think lost a test match to South Africa, one test match to South Africa, if I'm not mistaken, or something along those lines. South Africa lost that series, but Sri Lanka is a really frustrating story.
Yeah, but
because
England has also won in South Africa. They won in New Zealand. They lost in West Indies. So
the South Africa series was a good one. I will say that was probably a much more difficult series to win, and the way they won it was pretty convincing. I will give that to them.
Chalo. Asad, do you want to go next?
Yeah, so for me, my pick was pretty straightforward for me, and that's Australia. And that's just the reason of the way they've built their team over the last year. I mean, let's face it, after their scandal, they were really down. And then the way they've actually built their team, for me, that's just been phenomenal. All these new players coming up, in the likes of Marnus, Khwaja. Of course, we all know when Smith came back what happened. But even before that, I think the way they were just building themselves up, and they really were resilient. I think that showed real test of their character. Their bowlers as well. Cummins, Stark. I think they have the best spinner in the world in Nathan. So for me, they're like a complete team, and that's done pretty well abroad as well. They squared the Ashes under very difficult conditions quite recently. So yeah, I think given all factors, where their players are, the lineup of the players, there's no one dominance. I would argue that, and India is very dominant on or determined or dependent on Kohli, I guess. But for me, this is a team which is much wider. All players play really together, and I think they have the best combination right now in the batting, bowling, and even fielding, really.
All right, Umair.
Yeah, I was between Australia and India. I just chose Australia because I think Australia right now are trending upwards at this very moment, whereas India are I feel they're kind of stagnating. They've been dominant for a couple of years. I wouldn't say they're they're going out of steam. With Australia, you can sense के जो trend है वो ऊपर की तरफ जा रहा है, especially with Smith back. That fast bowling lineup is insane, and then you also have Labuschagne kind of coming up, and just the fact that recently Australia smashed New Zealand, which is probably like the number 2 team in the rankings, I think. They would have won the Ashes series as well had it not been for that Smith injury. And quite frankly, I mean
had it not been for that Stokes innings, rather.
Yeah, so that, I mean, I think they would have won that as well. और फिर उसके अलावा ये है कि the fact that they had like a whole year without Smith, who's I think the best test player in the world right now. I think if you take out, say, Kohli from that Indian team for a year, I think they wouldn't be as good. So I think the fact that they're number 1 right now, they're trending up. It's kind of a pity that the Australia-India series that's coming up is probably not going to be played, but I think that would have been a decider. So I just went with Australia because I just think at this very moment they're on the way up compared to India.
They're just so mentally strong, yeah. You can't mess with them. They're mentally they're the toughest, I think.
अच्छा, तुमने अभी the test documentary देखी है तो तुम्हें इस वजह से भी थोड़ा propaganda तुमने buy कर लिया है ज़्यादा.
वो bias तो थोड़ा आ जाता है, but
no doubt they've always been. Where's their mental toughness in the UAE? Where's that mental toughness in India? कहाँ जाती है?
What's that? Yeah,
I'm saying where's the mental toughness? No. It's the same. No, I think it's the same thing. We're all buying into the same one. Like, oh, fast conditions cricket is like superior cricket, and spin supporting conditions are like inferior cricket. I think you belong to that club. Okay, anyway.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Hamad ki bari.
Yeah, so I went with Australia as well. I think Asad and Omer pretty much covered all the points, but just adding on to Omer's point about Smith, I think people also kind of miss the fact that David Warner was also out along with Smith, and he was a big component of what led to their Test cricket, not just the limited over success, but also the Test cricket success because of the starts he got for them up front.
I mean, Warner is a definition of home track bully.
No, I don't think you can say that because I think he has performed away as well.
Dude, his average in England this season in the Ashes was 4.
Yeah, that was his first series back. But I think after that he did get a century during that. I think in the second or third match, if I remember correctly.
No, he averaged 4 in that entire inning, in that entire series, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, I get your point.
So, I mean, they had that, and they had Khwaja coming up. They had Marcus coming up as well. Like these guys said, the bowling lineup with Stark, this, what do you call it? Hazelwood,
Cummins.
Yeah. I mean, Cummins, yeah. So I think these guys, and I mean, they're on the way up, like Omer was saying. So these guys have covered most of the points. I don't think I have much to add over there. I do think that they're more resilient. I agree with Asad. I do think that they can play on spinning tracks as well. I don't think you can say a batsman like Smith can't play spin. I would go with the Aussies.
All right, I guess I'll wrap it up.
Also, just to correct Karoom here, Warner's average was 9.5, not 4.
Chalo.
So,
Okay.
fake news alert.
Chalo.
But he came back damn strong after that, right?
He did
strong.
get 1 or 2 scores, I remember.
He got a 50, got 61.
Okay.
And then he scored a century against us, right? Against Pakistan.
Yeah, he had 3 ducks and a 50.
वो तो पाकिस्तान का राइट होता है ना, वो तो जो भी आउट ऑफ फॉर्म प्लेयर होता है
उसको फॉर्म में लाबुशेन को भी फॉर्म में लाए थे ना, right?
Labuschagne was coming out of England on a high, like.
No, there was another player on top of Warner that we brought back into form. Marsh, right? There was one player I'm forgetting.
I think Mitchell Marsh took us to the cleaners in the UAE.
Oni?
Yeah, so I mean, just when you think about like the ranking system as a whole, right? Like I genuinely believe that all 3 of these teams right now, India, New Zealand, and Australia, are like pretty much on par. But if I had to lean towards one team, I'm going to take my period like back to like 2 years, 3 years, not just like this last year. And I would lean towards India. I understand that Australia is on the way up, but I mean, really honestly, like if you just don't take into account this last series that they had with New Zealand, if that had also been cancelled, they would be number 1 right now.
So why would you take it out though?
That's it for me. Like I genuinely.
Why would you take that series out? Like that's
why would you take it out?
Right, because it's simple. It's because of the fact that Abhi cricket has come to a pause, right? Like you're talking when you say like best team right now, like especially for something like Test cricket that has so much nuance to it, you can't just say like at this very moment, one team is better than the other because your entire tours are based on like a certain plan. Even like the whole the fact that ICC have moved to this like Test calendar and come up with the whole championship. Like you have to weigh all of these things in, and Test cricket isn't just about like who's the best team like 1 month versus the next month versus the next month, and these rankings will continue to fluctuate, right? Like I think we're reading a little bit more into the nuance of the ranking systems when if I was to say that Australia are better than India right now, because okay, forget that India were touring New Zealand. What if they were touring Sri Lanka? Sri Lanka has been like their, I'm not even gonna go that way. But Uzair was mentioning earlier that like, oh wow, England have achieved something so huge by going and beating Sri Lanka. India have been thrashing Sri Lanka like I don't even want to like go back for how long now, right? They are the best team in subcontinent conditions by a mile and a half right now. There's not one team that's as good as them in that one half of sections, right? On the other hand, when you talk about faster conditions, I don't think you can say that Australia would win, all of their away tours against South Africa, England, and New Zealand comprehensively right now. But I think you can say for India that if they were to tour Sri Lanka, Pakistan, Bangladesh, they would win like hands down right now.
No, I agree with you. I'm just saying that the last tour with New Zealand, I mean, that's probably like two of the top three teams competing. And I mean, if India weren't getting smashed inside 3 days in both tests, I mean, I would still say they fought till the end.
Nothing to take away from how poor the losses were, right? Like nothing to take away from that at all. All I'm saying is that Test cricket, especially, they could one day or T20, the phir bhi thoda sa it's become like almost the same because you just want to favor batting everywhere now. But Test cricket has really just become a sport that's it's like horses for courses, right? And New Zealand, if they were to tour India right now, I would love to see the number of times they get to day 4 and 5. Like, it's just not going to happen. It just shows that, everyone, like Khurram said at the start, is more than happy to just become
they're all hometown bullies.
Masters of one set of conditions and just be like, fine, you know what, when we go away, dekha jayega.
So the only thing that I want to add in New Zealand's defense here is that they, in recent times, have an away win in UAE, which has been
against Pakistan, right?
Against Pakistan. Yeah. And yes, let's say that Pakistan didn't have a great, we were going through a rebuild at that phase. Still, the fact is that New Zealand came to UAE and beat Pakistan in UAE in a test series, not in a test match. They've done this. They've picked up a test match before as well, which was pretty big. And they've now picked up a series, which is a huge achievement for one of these Sena teams to do. Just like Uzair mentioned, right? For Sri Lanka, that is their only win. However, if we look at now going against India in this argument, India wasn't able to win a series in South Africa, even though Sri Lanka beat them less than a month later. They weren't able to compete against New Zealand at all. And they weren't able to compete against England, even though Pakistan drew a series against England in that same summer. In England.
Now you're going against your own pick.
Yeah, it is. But I'm just trying to show that these are all teams. Literally every single one of these teams cannot play away from home.
No, except England. England has the only one.
England can't play at home.
Season. Yeah,
England
but
can't play
I'm talking about
home.
away. You're mentioning away, so just put things in perspective. Out of all these teams over the last 2 years, England have played the most number of away games, and they're the only one with the winning record.
So England also cannot play. Has a batting lineup that cannot be called a test batting lineup. First of all, other than Root, who is also not performing.
उन्होंने 400 रन बनाए हैं South Africa में जाके.
South Africa just got beaten by Sri Lanka as well, right?
Yeah, but I'm just saying, if you're making 400 plus runs without anyone scoring a century in an innings, I think that's a test batting lineup any day.
No, England lost to West Indies away from home.
No, but I'm just saying your point was that England don't have a test batting lineup.
They don't have a batting lineup.
They're a team that has scored over 400 runs without anyone making a century.
I mean,
that's a test batting lineup.
I mean, people score 400 all the time. That's still not saying much. Ek series mein jaake they've made it, but they can't play. So the point is they can't play in their own home conditions because they don't have the batting lineup. They got destroyed, or should have gotten destroyed by Australia. They got lucky with that one Stokes inning.
They have the highest batting average in away from home among all of these teams.
That sounds great. They made 400 runs in South Africa. I'm sure that had something to do with it. But the point that I'm trying to make is, again, looking at statistics isn't really doing much because they can't bat in the West Indies on those decks, right? They got destroyed in the Caribbeans right before the World Cup. They can't bat at home. They can't bat what's it called in the UAE or in the subcontinent. right? They had a series against Sri Lanka. Sure, it was one series, but they're not. Other than their bowling, they don't really have much going for them.
Yeah. Another point I want to bring up between these teams that I think is a deciding factor for me when I was thinking about it is the spin department, right? Now that has been really troublesome for both, or well, you can argue, New Zealand, India, and England, right? Like their spin department, I think, has really been inconsistent, really lagging, and Australia in that department, I think, is just way superior. So that edge they definitely have. I mean, you can argue all these top 3-4 teams have similar-ish batting, pace, bowling departments are generally pretty comparable. India, sometimes they have ups and downs, but I think spin is that big factor, man. Like that is for Australia, that's far superior.
But would you rate Nathan Lyon in Australia higher than Jadeja in India, or Ashwin in India, or Chahal in India?
At this point, yeah. I mean, if you look at all the discussions, even around Ashwin, it's like, he's really down right now. To Umair's point a little bit, like he's not an upcoming, or he's not on the rise. I think he's actually on the downfall. He has to come back and kind of reinvent himself and things like that. So
yeah, but they'll be on the up when you go back to playing in India.
Yeah,
right? That's how you introduce new players as well. Like you wouldn't send a brand new spinner if you're part of like the Indian management to New Zealand, jahan pe, the conditions aren't really going to help him out much anyway. You're gonna make him stay and introduce him to the lineup in India, where the conditions are going to help him build confidence and have a good first series.
I also think that generally,
Nathan, I was just going to make the last point, Umair. Nathan has also done well in subcontinent. Yeah, I mean, he did pretty decently in the Pakistan, one of the Pakistan Test matches as well, right?
He is very, very good. I mean, not taking that away from him. He's an excellent bowler in Australia and away from Australia. But
yeah,
I don't know.
I was just going to say that to the point about India's spinners, I think they have. I mean, I think one of their problems in the last couple of months, at least, is that they don't really know who their like top test spinner is. They're going between Ashwin and Jadeja, और उस process में मेरे ख्याल से उन्होंने दोनों का जो है वो confidence खराब कर दिया है. So they don't really know who their like top spinner is.
Yeah.
So it's a weird.
And also, let's face it, yeah, Jadeja, he's not a specialist spinner, right? I mean, he plays a bit of that all-rounder role. Like, would you pick Jadeja in your 11 to be a frontline spinner over these guys? I don't think.
Yeah, I would pick
bits and pieces cricketer.
Dude, Jadeja is
technique अच्छी नहीं है, bowling technique थोड़ी पक्की.
Just quoting Manjrekar there.
He's useful, but would he be your only spinner? I mean, I don't know, man.
Jadeja was like the first spinner to pick up a wicket in New Zealand in like, what was it, like 2 or 3 series or something ridiculous. It was like away and home. Like it wasn't just I would pick him. He's a fantastic player. First of all, he can bat, he can bowl, he can field. And when I say he can field, there are very few people who can field like him right now.
That catch in New Zealand, man, crazy.
Ridiculous. And I think that one of the reasons why India has done so well is because of what he brings to the table. And when he's involved, he's been phenomenal. He's not very liked in India, and that is surprising. But there are other players as well in the Indian squad. Like you guys were talking about Kohli being like the only thing that's going for them. But Rahane has been doing well.
Pujara, man.
Pujara,
you can't forget.
Pujara in what's it called, in South Africa was phenomenal. And Australia.
Even Australia.
Yeah. Shami, every time he picks up the ball, it looks like he's going to take a wicket. I'm still not convinced on Bumrah, and he was doing really well in the South Africa series, but in the New Zealand series, I was a little. Although he had decent stats, it just didn't seem like he was all the way there.
Indian Pacers का यार यही issue है कि over time we've been seeing वही जो वसीम भाई वगैरह सारी सब बातें करते हैं कि they come few years, they make huge impacts, but they just cannot sustain great bowling for a very long time. Like the way somebody has.
Shami's been there for a while. Shami's been performing at a level that he could get picked in most teams at this point.
Yeah.
Maybe last 2-3 years, but yeah, another couple years need to be seen. They need to be performing for like 5-6 years, I'd say, to then say, "Acha, they're consistently good test bowlers."
Ishant Sharma, how did we forget Ishant Sharma as a test match bowler? He's
Again, past
phenomenal.
couple years.
We don't like him.
What?
What?
He's up
Wait,
and down.
What did you just
Ishant
say?
Sharma कहाँ से phenomenal हो गया भाई?
Ishant Sharma is their leading test match bowler right now. Away and
Past couple years, yeah.
Phenomenal कहाँ से हो गया यार?
he's been very, very good. He has been excellent.
He's been good past couple years.
Hold on.
He blows hot and cold, man. Like he'll have some really good series, but then he'll have some series which are like awful. So
The limited overseas. The limited overseas.
Not limited. Not just limited.
But he was really good in England. He was really good in England.
Phenomenal is a stretch. Like, come on, yaar.
I know you guys have your biases, but you guys need to watch the cricket to understand how good he is. He's been really, really good. Him and Shami have been the two best bowlers that India has had over the last 3 years.
No, I agree. I mean, I don't know about Ishant just as standalone as a bowler, but like to your larger point, I do think that their fast bowling is
really
like
good.
a lot better than it used to be. Or हमें काफी it hurts sometimes to see them being as good as they are. But they would definitely improve. Like the fast bowling is quite good. Kohli is, could go either way, but I think he's a decent captain in terms of like handling those fast bowlers. But I think just generally with the Indian team, I think that they hit their peak like a year back with that Australia series, and I think they're on their way. I think they're on their way down, or they're kind of stagnant. Like they're not.
Yes.
I don't see them like becoming much better than what they were.
Hold on. While we're going over this, so if you look at their record in that Australia series, right, all the way through before they went out and played against New Zealand, they also had that series against Bangladesh. They lost one match in 11 games and they drew one. So 9-1-1 right before this New Zealand series, like right before the New Zealand series. I think you're laying too much emphasis on the fact that they lost in New Zealand.
So ye chalo, we can probably
because
do a
it's
second episode
like,
on this where we can see Umair's predictions come true or not, whether who's on their way up and who's on their way down post-COVID.
Post-COVID, yeah. I just think you're emphasizing the New Zealand series too much. Like
because that's like for the Australia versus England Ashes series and the India versus New Zealand series is like the best. It's like the best time to judge because you're having like the top teams play each other.
But you can't say that in Test cricket because of conditions.
Yeah, but look at the series.
Yeah, मतलब 3 दिन के अंदर अगर तुम हार रहे हो, so you're not even competitive then.
Rana, what's Rana
saying? What do you say?
Before the New Zealand series, look at the teams that they played: West Indies, Bangladesh.
South Africa. Don't forget South Africa.
Africa, yes, but South Africa was. Sure, but that was probably the worst teams that they've had in the last 10, 20 years.
Before that was Australia. They beat them as well.
Yeah, and that was probably the worst team Australia has had in the last 10, 20 years as well.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay, hold on.
And the other thing is that they're all games played at home other than West Indies, which is away, which West Indies is probably the 8th or 9th ranked team.
Australia, they were
the same West Indies team that
Australia, they were touring away, right?
Australia,
they were away.
Yeah, they toured away. Yes, I'm talking about the matches.
That's without the Smith and Warner series.
Sure, but you look. You can contextualize that, fine. But then you get into an argument of like the overall quality of Test cricket, right? Ab hum wo to nahi discuss kare. We're talking about who's the number 1 team right now.
Overall Test
which team right now would go to Australia and beat Australia without Smith and Warner?
What do you mean without?
I can't name a team.
If it was not India that went to Australia and beat.
I think New Zealand would beat them.
England would beat them.
New Zealand might, yeah. New Zealand might.
You think England would beat them? England comes back at home.
England would take it to them. I think New Zealand would take it to them. Yeah. Without Smith and Warner, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
India,
for sure, but it'll be a good fight.
It'll be a good fight, but you take out Smith and Warner from the teams, it's not a 50-50 chance. I would maybe say that the other team would have 65%.
England was playing at home without Smith. and Warner made no runs in that match, and they still lost. They still only drew the series.
Yeah.
Only drew the series, and they lost that game.
Yeah.
But there's
At
many
home.
other factors, yeah.
At home.
Wait, are you talking about the Ashes? And the Ashes, Smith and Warner were playing. What are you talking about?
Smith got hit in the head and had to retire. Yeah, so just that. Let's take just that one match, right?
That was probably what the second match that they played after they came back from a 2-year break, man.
Yeah. So that's fine, right? So the thing was that the scenario was that Smith and Warner aren't playing, right? So Smith was playing. He got hit in the head. He had to retire. Warner made no runs in that match, and they still ended up winning in England, not in Australia.
That's why that was my number one pick team. You just
yeah. The point is that England sucks more than any of these top 5 teams. I would actually.
It's the only team. It's the only team with an away winning record out of all of these teams. And
I would think that Sri Lanka's. I think Sri Lanka's performance away from home has been more impressive than England.
Take minute. If we're going to contextualize India's wins, then we need to contextualize England's too. Like, okay, fine, they went and beat this version of South Africa. But then how much does that matter? For the amount, let's also throw in the amount of cricket that they play, right? Which is why, like,
they played the most amount of test matches.
So before we start this call, SR, I might just go with New Zealand. Like, New Zealand don't get to play nearly as much cricket as India, Australia, and England get. For the amount of cricket that England get to play all over the world, they're absolutely garbage, in my opinion.
They don't really care about like Test cricket right now as well. Like
England.
They want to be a beast in ODI.
It's the only place, like England and Australia are the only places right now where you can talk about like actual like ticket sales for Test cricket.
Like Umair
Corona virus. They're going to rename this to the Umair virus. ये जो सारे वो Wimbledon club वाले और Lords वाले.
England
this comment is not going to go well with anyone.
They've invested so much into their ODI team and their T20 team, and they're
but
like
that doesn't mean it's not mutually exclusive. Like the fact that you're investing in ODI doesn't mean you don't care about Test cricket.
I mean, they want
care as in sense like they're like the World Cup was what they wanted.
Umair, this is still the same country you're talking about, where more people tuned in to watch the Wimbledon final between two non-Englishmen than the same day that the Cricket World Cup final was happening. They still care about Test cricket more than any other form of cricket.
No, man, I agree with Umair though, because
saying that their ODI जो आपकी team इतनी अच्छी हो गई है, I mean they're still trying to figure out like how to balance like that ODI and Test thing, and if they've agreed that ODI team is going to be so good.
And then upcoming talent with all these T20 leagues and now them launching the 100 and whatnot. I mean, their youngsters are not going to go and play Test cricket. They're not going to get attracted to that.
Yeah, that they're just doing because they're trying to get people back into cricket, because the problem that the UK is facing is that cricket is kind of a dying sport there, despite
that flows into the cricket that flows into what the athlete's thinking is that as well, right? Because he needs to earn as well, and he's earning from these leagues and the 100 and whatever else, rather than Test cricket. Test cricket might be the pinnacle of cricket or whatever, but it's not going to be there for too long.
I don't think it's a dying sport, by the way. I think that's a bias here.
We're going off topic.
I think we're also out of time.
I think we're going off topic and
but I think at this point, Param, you can cut the stuff out because we're over time.
Okay, what do we want to get to in terms of a consensus in regarding the Test team? So it sounds like we have 3 people who have
Australia, so there's no real vote over here.
Yeah, there's no real vote.
Yeah, and Uzair being the Kira that he is.
Okay, so if you have to pick between Australia and India right now, which one would you go with?
If I had to pick right now, I would go with Australia because they're on the up. I agree with Umair what he said, that they're the team that is improving the most. They're improving the most, and I like the team that they're building and the unit that they have, and I think they'll be a strong team.
On that note, and considering that how little Uzair knows about Test cricket, we can assume that there's a tie. Considering we picked
Another fake
England,
news alert from Khurram.
considering
Warner
we
की
picked
4 की
England,
average है. Warner की 4 की average है.
यार 4 और 9 के बीच में कितना ज्यादा
4 और
फर्क.
9.5 में कोई फर्क नहीं
Forget
है.
it. Ishant Sharma is phenomenal. That's where the discussion
Ishant Sharma is
ended.
phenomenal.
I will post video links under this in the description around Ishant Sharma. If you guys are watching and you agree with me that Ishant Sharma is phenomenal, please comment and like the video. And let everyone know that Uzair is the dumbass for picking England.
Away
Thank you,
teams,
everyone.
away games matter.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Hey.
Thanks, guys.
All right.
Bye.